Good morning, everyone. This is the September meeting of the Oregon Liquor Control Commission. And Laura, I don't like using the word clerk, so please take the roll.
Commissioner Curran?
Here.
Commissioner Floyd?
Here.
Commissioner Harper?
Here.
Commissioner Molinas?
Here.
Commissioner Paulson?
Here.
Chair Rosenbaum?
Here. Our first order is the employer support of the Guard and Reserve presentation by the National Guard to the Eugene Regional Manager, Andy Jurek.
Good morning, folks.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm Colonel Billups from the Department of Defense ESGR Committee. With me here today is my handler, Janet, who's been performing that arduous task for about 45 years now. Just like to give you a little background on why we're here today. Over the past several decades, the active military forces have been drawn down so far that they can't maintain what we call, or in the past used to, I retired in 97, two MRC, two major regional conflicts. An example would be if North Korea and Iran went off at the same time, there aren't enough active forces to sustain lengthy combat, so they must rely on the Guard and Reserve. In ESGR, our main mission is to educate the Guardsmen, reservists, their families, and their employers on USERRA, the Uniformed Services Employment and Reemployment Rights Act. A significant part of that act is that upon return from an active duty deployment, the Guardsmen and reservists is guaranteed the same or similar job benefit. In addition, they are not to lose any incident advantage of employment as a result of their military service. The law also includes what we call an escalator clause. Escalator is moving along, the Guardsman or reservist gets off, goes on an active duty deployment. Escalator keeps moving. When they return, they don't get back on the escalator where they got off. They get back on right here where they would have been had they not left their civilian employer. What this means is if they've gone over, say, 5 years and are entitled to additional vacation leave, they get it. They were entitled to a step increase, they get it. They don't lose anything other than being gone during that time. And finally, we encourage the Guardsmen and reservists to recommend their supervisors and employers for the various awards we have. Sergeant Smoot here has recommended her supervisor, Andrew Jurek, for what we call a Patriot Award. For his support of her above and beyond, supporting her while she had numerous deployments and active duty assignments. Anyway, here's the award. Why don't you, thank you. Thank you.
If you want to say a couple words?
No, I'm good.
That's very nice, and we're very proud of you. Next item is the report on issues with vape products from the Oregon Health Authority, Dr. Richard Lehman. Good morning, Dr. Lehman.
Good morning, Chair Rosenbaum and members of the Commission. My name is Richard Lehman. I am the Chief Medical Officer for Health Security, Preparedness, and Response at Oregon Public Health Division, and our address is 800 Northeast Oregon Street, Suite 772 in Portland. I'd also like to introduce my colleagues, Melissa Powell, who is the manager of the Preparedness, Surveillance, and Epidemiology team, which has been instrumental in our work on this investigation, and Jonathan Modai, who is the Public Information Officer for the Oregon Public Health Division and our Communications Specialist. So without further ado, let's talk a little bit about vaping-associated lung injury. Back in June, a number of physicians in Wisconsin and Illinois noted patients who were coming in with respiratory illness. People were presenting with chest pain, shortness of breath, and cough. Some also had vomiting and diarrhea. Some had fever. The patients were not exclusively, but were primarily adolescents and young adults in their early 20s. On chest x-ray, they showed evidence of pneumonia, or at least some kind of gunk down in the lungs, and most of these folks were requiring hospitalization. When someone had the thought of asking about possible substance exposures, it turned out that all of these people had recently used vaping products or e-cigarettes. At this point, our case definition is in Oregon is a person who is hospitalized for a respiratory illness and who has no evidence of infection leading to this illness or other obvious explanations for the illness, and this person had vaped or used e-cigarettes in the 90 days prior to the onset of illness. Here's where we are nationally, and this is based on the information from CDC. Actually, in a couple of hours, this information will be outdated because CDC is regularly updating its information on Thursdays. But as of their most recent posting, there are 380 cases that have been identified nationwide. Additional cases are under investigation, and there have been 6 deaths that have been reported and investigated by CDC. It does sound as though there is one additional death that has been reported in the media, but we are waiting for CDC's confirmation. Here in Oregon, we have 4 cases that meet this case definition. We have other folks who we are looking into who may meet that case definition, and we have 1 known death. In public health, we have several roles in this situation, several roles in investigation. One of those is to find people who have been affected by this so that we can learn more about what's going on and make sure that they get appropriate supportive care at this point. Since we don't have any sort of cure, we're still learning more about the nature of the injury. So we do need to find out exactly, is there a common mechanism of injury here? And we need to determine whether vaping and e-cigarette use is actually what caused the illness. Still a little early to say that. We are attempting to find cases by communicating with clinicians to ask them to let us know about possible cases, possible folks who have been affected by unexplained pulmonary illness and who have recent history of vaping. We also have reached out specifically to pulmonologists who we think will lung specialists who we think are the folks who would be consulted on pretty much all of these cases, and are reaching out specially to them to encourage them to let us know about any cases of which they become aware. In order to learn more about these illnesses, we are doing extensive chart reviews, looking at the medical charts in order to find out about what these cases, what these people experienced during the course of their illness. We are also talking with the clinicians in order to get additional information that might not be available from the chart. And we're interviewing the patients themselves, as well as other folks who might have more knowledge of the course of illness before the person sought health care. Clearly, we're all interested in finding out whether vaping is the actual cause of these problems. And so through our case interviews, we're learning more about what products people use, how they use them, how frequently they use them, and when they use them in relation to the onset of illness. We are also doing our best to obtain product that was used by these folks in the time before they became ill, and we're working with the Federal Food and Drug Administration, which is coordinating testing nationally to find out what is in these compounds in terms of both the intentional products that are added and also potentially contaminants or toxins that might be in there. To this point, we do not have a common link, but we are continuing to work on that. And then as we learn more about the specific products that were used by cases here in Oregon, we will keep you apprised of the situation. So that's a bit of background on this evolving situation and the role of the Oregon Health Authority in doing these investigations, and I would be glad to take any questions.
You mentioned there was a kind of an outbreak in Wisconsin. Is there any correlation between any of the, is there any, I guess a question would be, is there any particular geographic area where this has been particularly bad? Or any market, I guess I would say, where the outbreak's been bad of these lung issues?
So we have continued to see cases in Wisconsin. We have seen a pretty large cluster of cases in Utah, perhaps disproportionate to the population. We've also seen a fair number of cases in North Carolina and in Illinois. So we don't know for sure, though, whether this is something that is new. We've been seeing a lot of cases since June, but maybe that's because there were smart doctors who asked the right questions, and that made us all think, is this possibly what's going on? And we started asking regularly. We started asking these sort of things. So sometimes we see an increase in the number of cases because the number of cases is actually increasing. Sometimes it happens because we've actually now recognized that this is a possibility and we've started asking the right questions. So we may be able now to identify more of them because we're asking the right questions.
Thank you, Chair. Welcome, Dr. Lehman. I'm excited to know there's news out. They say that a lot of people are using a cannabis product in replacement of the product that's already in the vaping mechanism, which in turn, when you purchase one of these vaping things, is it, and maybe that's for us, you have to be 21 years of age, but each one of these cannabis capsules, is it preset to pre-fill the vaping product that's sold at our convenience stores? And also, is that a correlation between what you're going to study? So are you telling us here at the OLCC that you will be studying cannabis?
So to answer both of those questions, I'm not an expert on vaping delivery systems, but from what I have learned, there are products which are pre-filled, but it is also possible to get cartridges that people then on the sly or by design can then fill with whatever product they choose to vape. And in answer to your second question, we nationally, in the most recent data that has been released by CDC, we are seeing many, many folks who are vaping cannabis or related products, but there are between 10 and 20% of folks who report only vaping nicotine-based products. So we have not been able to nail this down entirely to cannabis only. We are not after any particular compound at this point. We are just trying to learn what is associated with illness, and we hope that that will help us to learn what is going on.
Doctor, are you recognizing any lack of cooperation from those that you're working with or involved with on this?
This may be less of an issue in Oregon than it might be in some other states, in that use of cannabis-based products is legal. I think there may be some reluctance. And it may be not because of legal concerns, but also people are thinking, gosh, do I feel dumb? I wish I hadn't done this. If indeed they are making the association between those two things, between a possible exposure and the illness that resulted. My impression is that people are being pretty forthcoming with information.
My last question. So
You can have as many as you want.
I know that when they use these vaping products, I mean, there's a big plume of smoke.
Yep.
Can you get secondhand plume of smoke? I mean, if you're next to the cover.
Short answer, I would say yes, you can, just because if there are particles or aerosols that are suspended, it's out there and you're breathing in next to that. I think that there is certainly the chance that you could get what we used to call side stream smoke, secondhand smoke, in this case vapor though.
I got one question, Steve. You want to go? Go ahead.
So, thanks for being here, really appreciate it.
Glad to be here.
As this investigation goes on, science takes a while, to look at attribution, study these cases. So how does the CDC process work as this continues and you try to research and figure out what is the causes here? Is there a part of the process where it's ongoing?
It is.
I'm expecting that we won't have a seminal conclusion in any short amount of time. So I'm wondering how we expect to continue to get information as the investigation and research continues.
Right. Within the past month, CDC has, I think, stepped up in an appropriate way. And certainly folks in Wisconsin and Illinois were collecting information as best they could. But I think if we think that this is potentially a common problem and what's happening in Oregon is in some way similar to what's happening in North Carolina is some way similar to what's happening in Utah, there is value and there is power in being able to pull that information all into one place and look at it together. And that's the role that CDC is playing. So we are working with them to collect information and then share that information so that we can get it all in one place, analyze it together. And that may be the key step in terms of our being able to identify what particular characteristics or what particular products are actually associated with increased risk. If we can find that out, then through the testing in FDA, we will be able to make sure that those products can get tested, and that will potentially allow us to identify a particular toxin or contaminant, or perhaps it's a process. Perhaps it's just the act of vaporizing certain compounds and then getting those way down into the lungs. In general, there aren't a lot of things that it seems like a great idea to like burn up and then breathe into your lungs from a public health point of view. So we will learn more as this goes on.
From your presentation, the one obvious issue is you can't regulate something unless you know what's going on. So, and we don't know what's going on at this point. 2 weeks ago, I learned something that was really frightening to me. I mean, it really got my attention. The Mexican cartels are using a pesticide called carbofluorine, which is an extremely toxic pesticide, but it's very effective. And I was just wondering, and they're using it in more than one place. It's getting into the food stream, to the water stream, and also to the food process. And it's becoming a big issue. Are you testing for pesticides?
So FDA is testing for pesticides, and also, and this is not my area of expertise, but my colleagues, I could certainly talk with my colleagues in the marijuana program at OHA as to exactly what testing is done on a routine basis.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you.
Steve, do you have anything else on that before?
Just to thank them for the work they're doing. We have a limited role in assisting them and their needs for the investigation, and as a part of that, we're under their confidentiality as we proceed with them. But it's quite a service to have public health in place here in OHA and the CDC and FDA working to get us the information we need so you can take steps to regulate this product safely for our consumers. Thank you.
Sure.
Executive Director Marks, if something happens like the whole country bans these products when it comes to Oregon, what role will we play with our legislative partners to potentially ban a specific product? And is this something that's normal across? It's happened here in Oregon for banning a product prior.
So, national states are the ones that regulate marijuana and legalized it. So you will have the choice into what to do and how to evaluate our rules around this. I expect that probably you're going to want to take a look at our rules in the wake of this and what we're learning and what we know and make some decisions about what additive, we're looking at additives, we're looking at products or additives that we're banning, those that are allowed. I think a review of that, but the one thing in the course of that review, if we do it in a month or 2 months or at whatever time frame we want to take a look at that, I don't think we're going to have determinative science. So we're going to have to work with scientists, public health people, our consumers, our retailers, and you to help make judgments about, what is right for this commission to adopt on the behalf of Oregon to meet our regulatory responsibilities. So, difficult job. We have in place. We can get you more information in terms of our role. We do the labeling. We review all additives. The ingredients are supposed to be disclosed and listed on that. We don't test for all those products that are active ingredients that they have identified. So we're taking a look. We're working on those not just within Oregon, but within our partner states that are also regulating cannabis to come to some recommendations. So have been constantly reviewing the actions of other states, what they're looking at. We've been sharing information now. So in, the next few weeks' time, I think we'll have more information for you on, what we think the process ought to be, maybe to look at that if it's necessary, what you think, Mr. Chairman, feel about moving forward and whether we need to open up that section of our rules dealing with it and take some action.
Any other comments, please?
No, I just wanted to thank staff. I know all of us have been concerned on it, and I've appreciated the additional the communications on it as we've been working through it, and also appreciated the people in the community and members of the industry that have reached out. And because we don't know, I think a lot of people have stepped up and taken additional precautions, just because all of us are scared and concerned, and it's troubling. So I think in as much as in our role we can facilitate the OHA and CDC, I know that we're all willing to, and I appreciate the staff keeping us informed of the latest, and also putting out the blast to make sure that the community's informed as well, so that they can know what we know when we know it. So I think that's been the best approach we can take at this point.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I want to add to my comments. I think the response of our licensees has been very incredible.
That's what
in terms of looking at what they're doing. I think our message was pretty effective, and what we had was we asked them to talk to those producers, to question them about their products, their methodologies, what's in it. And some of them are pulling products where the processor producers are not providing enough information to them. We're going to be following up with a survey to see what products people actually pulled off their shelves as a part of their individual review to protect consumers and have confidence in the products out there. I think they now have an awareness both on the processor side and at retail about, the risk, maybe even more so than the risk from this commission, of liabilities associated with what they're doing. So they're, I think, taking it very seriously. We've had a good response. I think statewide, we'll try to assess what that response really is for you. I have, emails and some information and news stories, but we haven't gotten a good job of getting an assessment of all the actions that people are taking to respond to our direction.
I'm glad you said that,
Yeah.
because they've been very wonderfully cooperative.
Yes.
I one other question, Doctor. I know that you're a scientist and you hate to speculate, and it's anathema to you, I'm sure, rightfully so, but the one thing we read about all the time is the vitamin E acetate, and whether or not that has any direct connection to this problem. I'm not asking you to speculate, but whatever opinion you want to give us on that, I would appreciate it.
So there has been in New York in particular, I guess they found a number of samples of product that contain vitamin E acetate. Nationally, the numbers are not quite as compelling. And I believe of 18 samples that they're aware of where that testing has been done, and they have been willing to report the results out, maybe half show evidence of vitamin E acetate. So there is a concern that if you vaporize something that is a fat, and this is a fat-soluble vitamin, if you take a fat or an oil and you vaporize it and you inhale that, and it congeals and becomes a fat or oil down in the lungs, that can produce what's called lipoid pneumonia. And there is some evidence that we're seeing some fats that are down in the lungs in the macrophages, which are cells that are down in your lungs, and their job is to keep things clean. And so they have gone around and they have found, oh, there's a globule of fat. I'm going to chew that up. And so we found evidence of what are called lipid-laden macrophages, suggesting that some fats or oils have gotten down into the lungs. That does not, unfortunately, well, I'll just say that does not prove to me and to many other people that that is entirely the cause of these illnesses. So I'd say the jury is still out on that.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Doctor. You're up.
Good morning, Chair Rosenbaum, members of the commission.
How dare you? How dare you? No, you're right, I don't know.
Chair, a lot of people are interested in that.
Yeah, rightfully so.
Great. Thank you. Good morning, Chair Rosenbaum, commissioners. For the record, my name is Kelly Rout. I am the director of the Administrative Policy and Process Division here at the OLCC, and I'm here to provide you with a proposal to amend some of our sanctions. So as by way of background, back at the May 2019 commission meeting, commissioners instructed staff to review the sanction schedule and make a proposal of potential rule or policy changes. So we did that. We took a look at the sanction schedule with the goal of strengthening OLCC's authority to hold licensees accountable. Before I get into the sort of substance of this presentation, I would like to thank Bryant Haley for researching the issue and meeting with APMP staff on recommendations, and also for providing the framework for this presentation. I'd also like to thank the APMP case presenters for their feedback on potential impactful changes in the short and long term. So, as we always start here in APMP, the legal authority for what we do. So the legal authority to issue penalties comes from statute. But for both alcohol and marijuana, we have the ability to cancel or suspend a license, but we do have the ability to impose civil penalties in addition to or in lieu of a suspension. In alcohol, we have set minimum and maximum penalties per violation for both licensees and service permittees. And for marijuana, we have a maximum penalty of now $10,000, but no minimum and no set penalties for worker permittees, but we do use the same penalties for worker permittees as we do for service permittees. So here's our proposal. I would like to, before I get into these, I would like to say this is just a starting point for us. We looked at items that could be implemented in the relative short term. We do see this as an ongoing process to improve our systems and increase licensee compliance. Other suggestions that we've come up with, such as training and education, or potentially changing how we aggregate or aggravate penalties, is a longer conversation that will take significant staff resources to develop and implement, but it is something that we're working on. So actually, let me go back. I'll just quickly, these are the things that we're going to talk about. Sales of alcoholic beverages to minors, sales of alcohol to visibly intoxicated persons, licensees permitting employees to work without permits. That's both marijuana worker permits and alcohol service permits. The increased civil penalty authority that we have for marijuana violations, and then also just a quick discussion on intentionality and what we do when we have that in a particular case. So first up, sales of alcoholic beverages to minors. And actually the next 3 slides are going to talk about violations that are all currently assessed at Category 3. So as you know, we have categories of violations from 1 through 5. Category 1 violations being the most serious with a presumptive penalty of license cancellation, and Category 5 violations being less serious. So these are all categorized as Category 3 violations, and so what we're going to do for each of these 3 violations is change the category either up or down. So for sales of alcoholic beverages to minors, we are actually proposing after this presentation to initiate rulemaking to amend the sanctions. This is in result to the 2019 legislative session where the legislature increased one of our key performance measures relating to alcohol sales to minors. It was originally about 82%, and they have increased it to 90%. Once we issued licenses to marijuana retailers, we started conducting marijuana decoy operations for sales marijuana to minors, and we had at the outset very poor compliance. In response to that, we did increase the penalties and achieved better compliance. And recently, public safety has conducted a number of minor decoy operations, both marijuana and alcohol. Since August 1st, they've done 99 visits for marijuana decoy operations with a 94% compliance rate, and about 59 visits on alcohol decoy operations with an 83% compliance rate. So there is a disparity in the compliance rate there, which potentially may justify an increase in the penalties. So what we are recommending is creating a new category for sales to minors. It's a 2B, so it would increase the penalty upwards. And something that we're considering is increasing the penalty for the first offense from a 10-day suspension or $1,650 civil penalty to a 20-day suspension or $3,300 civil penalty. That is a doubling of the penalty. Just to compare to marijuana, we increased the penalty there to a 30-day suspension or a $4,950 civil penalty. So this isn't quite as high, but it is an increase. I would like to note, just for the record, that penalties for liquor violations have not increased since the year 2000. And if we do move to increase these penalties, we would also be considering increasing the penalties for members of the responsible vendor program, although we haven't necessarily set out what those might be. And we would also likely increase the penalties for service permittees as well.
So let me stop you for one second. This is great. Through this whole thing, the one thing that I was thinking about is, okay, you've got a first offense on a 20-day suspension or a $3,300 civil penalty. In every single case that we have, just about every case that we have, after you have the 20-day suspension or a $3,300 civil penalty, there's an automatic 30% reduction right off the bat. Where does that come into play? So on a first offense with a 20-day suspension, we're really not talking about that because you're going to put the 30-day the 30% automatic reduction into that system somewhere.
Chair Rosenbaum, we do mention to licensees that if they accept responsibility for the violation, the penalty can be reduced. So it isn't automatic. We don't automatically cut it down. They do have to ask for it. We do have licensees that default and have to pay the full penalty or serve the full suspension, or they contest the case. So we don't actually automatically reduce everyone.
I'm not fighting with you, but it's
you're,
about 0.0001% of those that hit that category. No? You're shaking your head in the back.
No, we have about a good number of cases settle, but we have a lot of cases that default, and we do have a less number of cases that go to hearing, even on sales to minors. So I wouldn't say it's all cases settle out for that amount. But the point is well taken, that there would be a reduction, although it would be less of a reduction. So we would 30% on 20 days would we would potentially reduce it to a 14-day suspension or equivalent civil penalty.
I guess my question is, did staff have this as part of their discussion?
Potentially. I was not part of those initial discussions, but that's something that we can think about is, settling. And I know we've had discussions at previous commission meetings about settlement and the percentage. And as we've mentioned, that 30% reduction has been in play since before I started working here 16 years ago. So, it's a discussion that we could certainly have on how much we're willing to reduce a penalty.
Okay. By the way, I think you guys did a beautiful job on this. I really do.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Okay.
So I'll move on to the next proposal, which is sales to visibly intoxicated persons, also currently categorized as a Category 3. We are recommending increasing this to a Category 2 violation, and that's because selling alcohol to a visibly intoxicated person is a significant public safety risk. We do, unruled, define a Category 2 violation as a violation that creates an immediate threat to public health and safety, and I think that reflects this here. We don't see a lot of these cases in comparison to other types of violations. There is a knowledge element to proving this case, which can sometimes be challenging. However, we do have cases where licensees or permittees are selling alcohol to visibly intoxicated persons, and then that person goes out, drives intoxicated, which results in potentially one or more fatalities. And we have had cases this year or last year that have resulted in that. And the penalty is the same as selling alcohol to a minor or selling without a service permit. So we would recommend increasing the penalty to a Category 2. The presumptive penalty for that is a mandatory suspension, which we do not reduce to a civil penalty. So that would apply both to licensees and permittees. Mandatory 30-day suspension for the first offense. The next violation is for permitting employees to work without a permit, also a Category 3 violation. We are proposing two things here that sort of balance each other. While it's important that licensees have employees that have service permits, and in order to get a service permit, you do have to get the alcohol training, which is important to be able to check ID and assess signs of visible intoxication. A lot of the violations that we are seeing is really a result of a paperwork mix-up or not submitting something within the time frame. So we do see this as something that would warrant being a lesser category. So we are recommending that this go from a Category 3 to a Category 4 violation, where the first offense would be 7-day suspension or $1,100 civil penalty. That being said, we do see licensees permitting employees to work without permits for a significant period of time, and we do have rule language that allows us to increase the penalty if they've permitted the employee to work for more than 6 months. However, there is a disparity in that if a licensee has permitted an employee to work 6 months in a day without a permit or 2 years, the penalty is the same. So we are recommending to aggravate for every 6-month period that a person works without a permit, and potentially cap it at some point in time, but that would be for discussion in rulemaking. And something I forgot to mention in the previous slide is that for both the sales to visibly intoxicated persons and permitting employees to work without a permit, we would like to undergo rulemaking, and we are sort of proposing that we would initiate rulemaking at a future meeting, even as early as the October commission meeting. For the marijuana worker permits, we have rulemaking that's currently open that we could easily slip this into, because we have not done a notice of rulemaking on that yet.
Just out of curiosity, why not every 3 months? Did you have a discussion on 3 months as opposed to 6 months?
I don't believe we did, Chair Rosenbaum, just because we have already set out in rule 6-month period, and that was something that we codified in rule after having that be proven in contested case precedent. So 6 months is what we are recommending. However, this is a proposal for you to provide us with suggestions if you would like us to go in a different direction. So. And I would like to note that for licensees permitting employees to work without a permit, because the employee did not have a service permit, we cannot charge the permittee administratively. If the inspector finds that this person is furnishing alcohol without a permit and the elements have been met, they can charge that permittee criminally if they see the person furnished without a permit. But we aren't able to cite them administratively. Next up is the marijuana civil penalties. You heard in listening sessions and in legislative updates that the civil penalty by statute has increased to $10,000 per violation. So how do we use that? So one recommendation was to just double civil penalties for violations. That could be comprehensively or selectively. And we did initiate rulemaking on this in June, so we are currently evaluating what we can do. We just 2 days ago had a Rules Advisory Committee for marijuana where we put forward a recommendation to just double the penalty outright. In rule, it says that one suspension day equals $165 of civil penalty. We are doubling that to $330. And asked the Rules Advisory Committee members what they thought about that. We did hear some support from licensees for just outright doubling. They believe that if licensees commit these violations, that they should be held responsible to this standard, and they were perfectly fine with doubling it. But we also did hear that perhaps the increased civil penalties is something that could be used in settlement negotiations if there was a cancelable offense and we wanted to impose a high civil penalty. That is authority that we already have and have already utilized, but it was a point that was well taken. And we could certainly discuss selectively doubling some penalties that would create there are some implementation issues in deciding which ones those would be and potentially having to categorize them. So we just put forth the easiest change, which is just changing that particular number in rule, but I'd certainly be open to hearing to feedback. And just a point on the Rules Advisory Committees that we have had, overall we think they've gone really well. A lot of good discussion, and this conversation about penalties generated a very good discussion about penalties and mitigation in general. The next slide just sort of lays it out, visual, what these increased penalties could be if they were just doubled. I've just put categories 3s and 4s up here. Category 5s would also be effective. Category 1s and 2s are ones that result in mandatory suspension or cancellation, so they would not be affected by this change. So for your first level category 3, it just shows what that would look like if we were to propose the penalty. But per our previous discussion in this meeting, some of those could be settled for a lesser amount.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
is one of your categories for reviewing the, and I know this is already set, but do you have a category based upon what income these businesses are bringing in? And is there some thought that you totally believe that these businesses can bring in $3,300 a month? Small business, big business, middle-sized business that can afford these types of penalties?
Chair Rosenbaum, Commissioner Harper, we do not currently have a mechanism in place to assess penalties based on income. That would be, we don't have that information. We don't receive that information, especially on the alcohol side. While we do have some information on retail sales of marijuana licensees, we don't have data on other transfers and how much money people are making. That would require us to collect a lot of information and then make judgments based on how much people are making, which I think would be really difficult for us to implement.
Yeah, my questions and concerns are revenue.
Right.
If I know in my congressional district, small business has, they're just getting by. And different than some commissioners, I'm pro small business, and one infraction can knock you out of the park. But then again, you have insurance over here that's supposed to save you, but over here in the insurance world, we have exclusions. I want to make sure that we are looking at this in a way to promote business instead of put business out of business. So that was my concern.
Thank you, Commissioner Harper.
I have a lot, but
Yeah.
I definitely understand our premise, and I really appreciate minimums. I mean, I really, really appreciate that, and some people like maximum.
Thank you, Commissioner Harper. Yes, your point is well taken in that these penalties can affect different licensees differently. Some are large chains will feel this differently than a small convenience store. Absolutely. And it's difficult but we do want to impose the penalties consistently and fairly, not arbitrarily. But then also acknowledge that, providing a license is a privilege, and with that privilege comes responsibility, and sort of the knowledge on the front end that if a violation does occur, no matter what the size of your bank account, that you will be held accountable for that and to potentially plan and prevent that. So.
I see large businesses.
Right.
I mean, I don't look like I'm 21. I try to, but I've been to large businesses that ID everybody. Man, dude couldn't walk and need to see your ID, and he says it's policy. And so that's what I want to, over 26 means visually looking over 26. I'm concerned that that's the way it's going to be for everybody. We're going to card everybody, so don't leave your wallet in your car. And it's sad because we're trying to save this money.
Thank you. The next topic is just a quick discussion on intentional violations. We've heard in recent commission meetings some of the violations sort of indicate a concern that there is potential willful disregard for violation of laws. Would like to point out that where violations can be proven to be intentional, the penalty will be aggravated, resulting in an increased suspension or civil penalty. And then for cases involving dishonest conduct, the penalty can be aggravated to license cancellation. We do acknowledge that sometimes it is difficult to approve an intentional violation, even if we know that it looks pretty bad, that there's potentially something going on there. And so our response to that is to work with public safety staff to work on articulating the facts needed to show those intentional violations, to hold those licensees to account when we have a pretty good idea that something's going on there, of, sort of intentionally trying to violate our laws.
So if cameras were out for 7 months as opposed to 3 days?
Correct. I think it just would prompt more questions needing to be asked and really probe what's going on here. A lot of times we will, the licensee will say, yeah, no, there was a serious problem here. I wasn't alerted by my provider. Here's the documentation to show this, compared with, someone who's evading the answers. And I think if we, I think working on just sort of probing more, just so that we can potentially get to the meat of these issues, especially where potential diversion is concerned.
I think that's the key to the whole thing.
Thank you. The final slide is just sort of an overall proposed timelines here. It's from today to April. Obviously, today we are reporting out on this, and we are proposing to initiate rulemaking on the sale to minor piece. We've also had our rules advisory committees for marijuana next month. If you are interested, we could initiate action on the penalties for permitting employees to work without a permit and sales to visibly intoxicated persons. In November, we could hold a rules advisory committee for sales to minors, and also we will be holding our public hearing on all the marijuana rules. In December, we will be taking final action on our marijuana rules, which would affect the civil penalties. And then starting in January, we could start doing public hearings on the sales to minors, rules advisory committees on the other proposals, with final action potentially on the sales to minors in February or March, with final action on the other proposals in April. Those are sort of the earliest we could get things done, and it could be pushed back if there is further discussion, but this is just sort of an idea of how things could shake out if we go down this road. And with that, I'm happy to answer any other questions.
Any question?
Chair.
Hi, Kelly.
Hi.
Hi, you guys. So our goal here, specifically with the alcohol penalties, our goal here is to hold licensees accountable. My suggestion would be to also hold the feet of the permittees to the fire as well. A lot of the violations are committed by the permittee, right? So some of these sales to VIPs, sales to minors, working without a service permit, they're committed by the permittee, and we hold the licensee assumes most of the monetary penalty or cancellation of the license, which, Harper, is, would, for most businesses, that would be their business, right? So the permittee, on the other hand, sees a penalty minimum of $25, right, to $500 minimal, and for most servers and bartenders in the industry, I mean, they can really pay that with one night's tips, maybe two. It's really just a slap on the hand. And so my suggestion, if we really want to see some change here, if we want to really affect change on some of these, I don't want to say silly, but completely avoidable violations, servicing without a permit to minors, to VIPs, then we should really look at a more stricter penalty structure for the permittee and really hold their feet to the fire and more accountable as well. Otherwise, our dear chair's heartburn level on this is just going to stay up here until we do something on that. So, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Floyd. Your point is well taken, and I think we could potentially increase the penalties sort of proportionally to the permittees as we are to the licensees, so that they also bear some of the burden here with the noncompliance.
Thanks, Kelly.
Anybody else?
Is there any thought, I mean, like you mentioned alcohol, it's been 20 years since there was an increase. And then every time we go through this, like it opens up a whole can of worms. You get people frustrated. Is there any thought of like making it, I don't know, increase with inflation or anything? I mean, because it's like, I mean, frankly, we're basically just bringing the maybe not exactly, but we're bringing the penalties up to where they would have been, or close to where they would have been based on inflation anyways. I mean, so it's is there any thought to that, or is that just kind of too difficult to consider? I don't know.
Commissioner Miletus, I think it's worth looking into. I think one potential challenge with the alcohol penalties is that we do have the cap at 5,000, and so we would probably reach that pretty quickly, and then those licensees would be looking at a mandatory suspension above that per violation. I do know that the federal government, the TTB, does from time to time increase their penalties due to the cost of inflation, which I had only just learned this year. So I'm sure that would require some number crunching that I am not capable of doing, but we do have capable staff here to see what that might look like, and then see if it might require a statutory change to increase the maximum per violation.
Yeah, and I mean, I think this looked great. And just a separate comment, I think and to Commissioner Harper's concerns, I think that the intent behind this is good, because in my mind, it does increase penalties, but it just gives you guys more tools to be able to, where maybe there, and this was a comment that came up in the listening sessions, concerns about us being overly penalizing, where I kind of look at it like, yeah, these are increased fees, but where we may have additional options to penalize someone versus cancellation. So we're may be able to keep them in business versus with a higher penalty versus just, cutting them. I think that's, these are only in extreme cases, but I kind of do look at it a little bit differently. So I think you guys have done a great job.
Thank you.
I'm, as I've been consistent for 2 years, if I'm looking at a maximum, I'm only looking at it for intentional violations. You know, that's, I don't want to put anybody out of business, but it gets me aggravated when I see intentional violations and not, you know, looking at what the penalties are for that. So I think you did a great job on this. Commissioner Floyd had an excellent cogent point, and I'm sure she's gonna, you know, be involved in making sure that that happens. I'm particularly interested in, on the intentional violations, what increased penalties are gonna be. So as a practical matter for this commission, I saw the timetable, but tell us, when is our next opportunity to give feedback to you?
Unless there are any objections, we will likely be proposing to initiate rulemaking at the next meeting on the increasing or changing the penalties for sales to intoxicated persons and sales to permittees. That will sort of open the door, and then we will schedule, you know, Rules Advisory Committee meetings, which we will invite, you know, commissioners to if they'd like to participate and provide input. Commissioner Miletus has been active in the Marijuana Rules Advisory Committee meetings, and so I think that's probably the good opportunity to provide that feedback.
So here's my suggestion, Steve. At the October meeting, let's schedule a luncheon after the meeting's over. And let's go through this again for the commissioners, and the commissioners can put their input before even the hearing starts. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
That way that we're gonna be involved in it right from the beginning, and we should be prepared. Why don't you send us that deck again a week before, or Laura, you can do it. That way we'll have a week to look at it and give our input at a luncheon before it starts. Sound okay? Okay.
All right, Chair.
Yeah.
I'd like to initiate a suggested motion. I move to initiate rulemaking on these matters and to hold a rulemaking hearing at staff's discretion.
And staff's discretion will be sometime after the October commission meeting.
Yeah, I think this is, probably just a general motion to get those two concepts that aren't being proposed today, to get them moving.
Commissioner Kern,
Yes.
Commissioner Floyd,
Yes.
Commissioner Harper,
Yes.
Commissioner Miletus,
Yes.
Commissioner Palcic,
Yes.
Chair Rosenbaum.
Yes,
Thank you very much.
you did a great job.
Thank you. Thank you. Turn it over to Emily.
Are you gonna do as good a job, Emily?
No.
I like that. Always set the expectations. I like that. Set the expectations, right? No, I'm not.
Just it's really low, so keep the bar. So good morning, Chair Rosenbaum and fellow commissioners. For the record, my name is Emily Febles, and I'm the Rules Coordinator for the Oregon Liquor Control Commission. Today, I have initial action for your consideration. As under tab A, you'll find the sales of alcoholic beverage to minor package that Kelly mentioned in the previous slides. So Chapter 471 of the Oregon Revised Statutes charges the Commission with the responsibility of ensuring that licensees and their employees refrain from selling alcoholic beverages to minors and allowing minors to consume alcoholic beverages. Specifically, ORS 471.346 charges the Commission with performing minor decoy operations to evaluate and cite licensees for sales to minors. Recently, the legislature modified the Commission's key performance measure relating to sales to minors. In response, staff sees it necessary to evaluate the penalties for selling alcohol to a minor. Staff propose rulemaking to work with industry to improve compliance and meet these performance goals. With that said, I will be happy to answer any questions.
Questions?
I have a parliamentary question, and I want to apologize because I shouldn't have created or stated that, but do we need Director Marks to have an initiation action for the staff's proposal to amend sanctions, the first ones, or we don't need to approve that?
I didn't, in thinking about this before the meeting, I didn't think it was absolutely necessary because it was more just your recommendation for us to go forth and provide, and come to you at a future meeting for initial action, which is where you would vote. It was sort of, unless there were any objections, that's what we were planning on doing. But I don't think that the vote was improper. So
No harm, no foul.
no harm, no foul. Yeah. So and just to make clear, this is on the actual initial action for the sales to minors alone.
And then we'll come back to you.
If there's no other questions, I need a motion, I guess.
Do we do another one, or was the last one?
I think
Sufficient.
a motion for this
We
specific.
need one separately.
Yeah.
So, Chair, I move to initiate rulemaking on the sale of alcoholic beverages to minors and to hold a rulemaking hearing at staff's discretion.
Commissioner Kern.
Yes.
Commissioner Floyd.
Yes.
Commissioner Harper.
Yes.
Commissioner Molinas.
Yes.
Commissioner Palcic.
Yes.
Chair Rosenbaum.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I
Thank you
just
so
want
much.
to add here, doing the penalties is one part of looking at how we achieve that key benchmarks. We're going to go out and do everything we can to communicate with our licensees about this change, about this direction, and about our emphasis. This probably will get some attention of the licensing community, but it's our job, I think, to communicate with them, to set forth, I think, the objectives we have for achieving higher compliance and hopefully getting results for us and for the legislature.
Steve, this is probably a good time to ask the question. Our staff does a fabulous job. I'm just not saying that, they do, and I think everybody appreciates that. We've got some new personnel that was approved by the legislature. Tell us what's going on with that, please. Well, that's why I asked the question.
So actually, we have an intense schedule of hiring of all of the personnel provided to us. So I can't tell you exactly when we're bringing in the new alcohol personnel. We've started off hiring our new HR personnel because HR hires everyone else, and moving through a complete priority. I can get that list for you for your review so you can see our ordering of getting to the hiring process of all those positions.
Yeah, I would be interested.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
Yeah, definitely.
Yes.
Okay, we'll get you that information, our current priority schedule.
I'm interested in diversity.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good morning, Chair
You have a
Rosenbaum.
thankless job.
Especially because I was getting out easy
I thank her
today,
all
so
the
we'll
time.
see.
We thank you too. We appreciate you. We give you a
I
hard
definitely
time.
do. Good morning, Chair Rosenbaum and Commissioners. I'm Andy Chiller with APNP, and I'm here to present the stipulated settlement agreements for commission ratification. Today, we have 2 alcohol stipulated settlements, 3 marijuana stipulated settlements, and 1 licensing stipulated settlements for your ratification and approval, and I'm happy to take any questions. We can start with alcohol if that works.
Let's do the 2 alcohol first. Any questions?
No.
I guess we need a motion, please, somebody?
Chair, I move to ratify the 2 stipulated settlement agreements as proposed by staff for alcohol violations.
Commissioner Kern.
Yes.
Commissioner Floyd.
Yes.
Commissioner Harper.
Aye.
Commissioner Molinas.
Yes.
Commissioner Palcic.
Yes.
Chair Rosenbaum.
Yes. Now we have the marijuana.
There are 3 marijuana stipulated settlement agreements.
Any questions? The only thing I don't have any questions because of where we're going, and I'm very happy with it. But this boundless technology, this is the type of thing in the future. There's at least some thought in my mind that there was some conscious violation here. But clerk, take the roll.
Need a motion.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Mr. Chair.
We need a motion. Commissioner Powell?
Sure. I move to ratify the 3 stipulated settlement agreements as proposed by staff specific to marijuana violations.
Commissioner Kern,
Yes.
Commissioner Floyd,
Yes.
Commissioner Harper,
Yes.
Commissioner Molinas,
Yes.
Commissioner Paulson,
Yes.
Chair Rosenbaum.
Yes. Last but not least is the stipulated settlement agreement. Any questions? I only have one. I just came back from North Carolina late yesterday, and I had every intention of looking up 2 months ago. We had the same basic stipulated agreement. I forgot the name of the organization. It's downtown Portland. And would you do me a favor, please? Would you go back a month or two, look at the stipulations? I just didn't have time to do it. And tell me how that organization is doing and what kind of violations, if any. Because it was almost verbatim to this one. You guys remember that?
Yeah.
So I just want to, I'm going to vote for this, but I just want to understand if there's 300, there were some ridiculous amount. What was the 478 relevant recorded incidents within a 500-foot radius of the proposed premises? So I'm going to ask in a couple of months about this one and where it's going to.
Yes, absolutely. And I don't recall exactly what licensee. I remember there was another licensing stipulated settlement agreement. I don't remember
It was
what.
2 or 3 months ago. I remember it very well. I just don't remember the name.
Yeah, Chair Rosenbaum, I would be happy to check into that for you,
Thank
and
you.
we can report out the next commission.
I need a
meeting.
motion on this, please.
Chair, I move to ratify the stipulated settlement agreement for Club Sinrock as proposed by staff.
Commissioner Kern,
Yes.
Commissioner Floyd,
Yes.
Commissioner Harper,
Yes.
Commissioner Molinas,
Yes.
Commissioner Paulson,
Yes.
Chair Rosenbaum.
Yes.
Thank you.
Purchasing. Nikki, you were, I gotta tell you, if anybody, I just came back from the meeting in North Carolina, and your name is, I had individual meetings,
That place is gonna
and
have.
your name always came up in very good terms.
Well, thank you very much.
They said you're one tough cookie.
No. Okay, good morning, Chair Rosenbaum, Commissioners. For the record, I'm Nikki Leslie, Purchasing Coordinator of the Purchasing Division. I'm here today to present to the Commission the listing of activity for the month of June, July, and August. Under tab 1, you'll find the detailed list of activity. Staff recommend Commission confirm the 56 items on the list. And I'll be happy to answer any question.
Anybody have any? I have one quick one. And Nikki, would you please see me? I'll be in the back with Steve later on. I want to give you a report on what happened.
Okay, cool.
But there were 2 or 3 companies that were interested in, they said the hottest item out there now are the 99-cent individual bottles.
99 cents,
The
the
90
product?
Yeah,
We do have some, actually, we're having
the
some.
the minis, but are we allowed to sell those?
We do, but we do have a floor price of $1.50. We cannot go below $1.50.
Okay,
That's
so
our-
what you do, what they said is, what you're doing is you're creating a 4-pack for it?
Right, there are, but basically what we call like a VAT pack, like a value added pack, kind of like, for example, Fireball. It's a big hottest thing, everybody know Fireball. They would come in and do like a gift pack in a box, all packaged together. It would be 4-pack, some of them, it depends on what the company decides. One of the hottest one last year we brought in was we call Western Sun product. They have 10 in the pack, and for the 10-pack they buy them, they can get it for $10. But it's not individual, they can't break them down, so they still have to take the whole package. So to kind of eliminate going out and get $1 for a bottle of mini, that's how we try to bypass that.
So is there a statutory requirement against $1.99? 99, what is it?
The full price of right. Basically, that's part of our markup formula that would have to change the total formula of how we do it. And also, don't forget, we also have the surcharge of the 25 cents for the commission for the that we will impose on the bottle charge.
Got it.
So that also
That's
adds
very
to it.
interesting. Thank you. I'm learning a lot.
No cheap, not that cheap.
Well, that 10
Now
pack
there is cheap.
that 10 pack for $10 is
That's good, and there is some cheap value out there. We do regular markdown, so that's how we clean out product. That's the only time that we go below the $1.50 in the mini. If we have product that we really need to clean it out, and then we'll drop the price to like $1 or something to pass the value, the saving to the consumer.
well. Some of the companies came back and said the millenniums love it.
Yes, we are adding more and more small size because that is one of the growing sizes. The 50 ml, the 200, and a lot of the value added pack coming packaged like that is huge is right now. So we have a lot of that this holiday. If you're looking for it, our holiday product start shipping in September 1st. We're getting a lot of those mini pack, value pack. Please check your local liquor store.
Yeah.
Okay, can we increase the size of the bottle of spirits? And we increase them from, was it,
A liter.
a liter?
We did a test pilot program.
How'd that turn out?
I thought you might ask.
I was going to ask, actually. Good question.
Okay. It is, the products start to arrive late July, and a lot of product, we got majority of it by mid-August, so it's really like a quick snapshot. So I really can't give you truly how it's going to trend. But right now, based on the August number, we probably, the 750 the liter itself was growing in 34 item we brought in. It was growing about 2%. For August, we came in at about 5%, so we actually kind of trend, I would say, with the trade up and down, we probably gain about 2% overall. So it's not, it does erode the 750 a little bit, but the liter have just basically increased the overall of the whole brand. So we gave probably overall in August, on those we're looking at probably about 400,000 in sales, which is and that's only probably half of the products here.
And in forecasting from now until the holiday season, we're gonna have a better holiday season than last year?
I would put my money on it.
Thank you.
Just for the sake of the commissioners, the reputation of Oregon on a national basis, from Steve right on down, and especially the warehouse, and Brian is in there now too, and it's excellent. People really, I mean that, they admire you guys, and your reputation is excellent. And I'm very proud of that, to tell you the truth.
You bet.
So thank you, Nikki.
Thank
We
you.
need a motion,
Chair.
Commissioner.
I move to confirm the 56 items for June, July, and August 2019.
Commissioner Kern?
Yes.
Commissioner Floyd?
Yes.
Commissioner Harper?
Yes.
Commissioner Molinas?
Yes.
Commissioner Paulson?
Yes.
Chair Rosenbaum?
Yes. Now we have trouble coming.
See, there we go.
Brian said I had to be here.
And Nikki's correct. We had a remarkable month, another record month in August, as well as a fiscal year-end close, another record. Good morning, Chair Rosenbaum, Commissioners. For the record, Brian Fleming, Director of Retail Services. And Laura's bringing it up. So my distinguished colleague Scott came down with the stomach flu yesterday, so he's not going to be here. There's a couple slides that I think I can handle it. However, I want to tell you that the work that he's done towards this presentation to you, but The analytics behind our future phases of expansion are remarkable. Thanks for the comments about Oregon and the people here. Reading some recent Discus articles about control states and supporting control states in the future, recognizing Oregon and Ohio as some of the progressive states to add stores and convenience and access was pretty well received. So with that, several of you, Commissioner Revol, Commissioner Harper, have been here through all phases of expansion. So I'm just going to briefly dive into what we've done to date, just as a reminder, and then we hope to propose to you for future. Here's the map. Many of you have seen it before. We completed all 5 phases. The last one to open will be in about 2 weeks in Manzanita on the coast. There was a lot of construction. You don't want to disrupt that store during the heyday of June, July, August. The summary here, we divided by state. We held open recruitments in numeric order, 1 through 5. We came back to Washington County in the 4th phase again because we'd missed some areas of Washington County that may have needed additional liquor store. We accepted all proposals anywhere within the specific phase, so anything qualified was brought to you. Any location, business type, these could be full standalones or boutiques. We relied heavily on the applicants to make the case as to why it aligned with our business needs. Here's the timeline that's been completed, and then this is just to remind you we've added 36. There's a disparity between 2 and 3 only in that we already had authority to operate in Damascus, and we just opened and advertised that as a solo individual market. So this is just the timeline. We started in originally August of 15 with the beginnings of communication. In 2016, we appointed, so we're about 3.5 years into it. 36 stores has been, I would say, for the team, retail services, distribution for new orders, a pretty remarkable feat. And the revenue certainly shows what's occurred. This is just a snapshot, more of a visual for liquor stores throughout Oregon. Under this, you'll see, take a second to load, this is all the new locations we've added across Oregon. And most of this is just visually to the markets. You can see the metro market corridors, Eugene, Medford, Portland Metro, a few rural components in there as well. For example, Northeast Oregon, we only added 1 store that's not really Northeast. It was in Parkdale. So the whole eastern side of the state, we had 1 that withdrew due to the license types they carried, but rural Oregon, far less than the metro markets. So what's a new phase? We'll call it the new phase or phase 6. It's targeted. So this it's still expansion. But we have so much behind this now, analytics. We have Esri data, which is GIS. We have mapping data. We have population, you name it, ODOT data, traffic counts. So we have a pile of information to use. If you look at the blue is really the rural markets. Anything else is generally the metro markets, mostly where the population lives. So let me take you through what this looks like. So we want to implement in 2 broad parts. Metro markets focusing on infill opportunities. This is whether it's populations, distances, and I'll give you some of that in the bottom. Rural markets, obviously, if it makes sense for OLCC, we don't want to drive a truck 48 miles out one way and 48 back. That doesn't make sense to have a small rural market, but if it's along potential routes of already existing businesses, that could be a model that we have in the rural areas. So using qualitative and quantitative data, district managers are actually very valuable insight. They're in the market all the time. They know where the liquor stores are. Some of them live in these communities. And so we're going to have to rely heavily on some of their expertise in the field. Some of you have also said, hey, what about here in prior phases? And it's made sense in many of them. I'll use a small example of North Williams. We added a store out there that was real small, and finally now is just coming up. That whole community is just redeveloped. It's a beautiful location. It's small, but it's petite, and it fits the neighborhood for what it is today. We also want to look at potential areas where you all may have seen a proposal that didn't meet the muster, yet the area did. And there was no way to say, well, let's do it again, because we really like the area. The metrics supported population, distance, but we didn't have the potential business plan that met with your approval. So in the quantitative piece, this was Scott's slide, and he would have taken some of this. We've got population, resident, daytime, county. I don't know if you knew, but census blocks in Oregon, there's 196,000. Thought you should know that. But rolling up into tracks from the blocks that we've identified, the different census areas, distance and drive times between current location. We also have, and what Scott put in here is to a lesser extent, but higher education levels, traffic volumes, per capita income. There is a correlation between spend and purchases based on, different levels of education and volumes of traffic. So why the targeted approach? Solely focus our resources on the greatest areas of opportunity, identifying that population that may need one closer. Potential for mitigating the impact of the existing stores. We cited some in some markets that had some significant impact in understanding population, driving distance at 5 o'clock on a Friday. We have all that information today, so we may be able to help. The good news, or generally, a store that had an impact in 10 to 12 or 12 to 18 months, generally, that impact begins to come back and climb with the state. And we can do that at the next expansion update. But many of the stores that had some impact are beginning to grow again. So that's important. What I mentioned about the rural markets is we don't want to sacrifice some of our business efficiencies. We don't want to send the truck all the way down the road and back for 11 cases of liquor. That doesn't make sense to OLCC. The other thing is, and we have a few markets like this that mandatory requirements. There's places in Oregon where there is no high-speed internet. The only connection is at the house that's across the street through satellite. And you can't maintain that all day without a high cost. We have stores like this. This is how rural we get. We want to make sure that they're willing to have those types of mechanisms to get the information to us. Point of sale systems, mandatory requirement. So,
just a point on that, if I may. I never thought I'd see the day that liquor would be driving infrastructure for for high-speed internet, but it could be. It's an issue on my side of the hill.
Yeah, certainly the southeast corner, you all have heard about Fields before. Mm-hmm. They literally go across to the house when they close and punch in the data for the bottle sold that day. But it works, it's unique, and they still sell in bottles, and I mean, it's 20 miles from Nevada. So we hope this streamlines the interview and appointment processes to get new locations open sooner. If you look at the 5 phases over 3 years, you guys have been a ton of help. Some of you throughout the whole time, but we had a day or two in the first, but we're going to bring you portions so that we hopefully can get through the phase, not necessarily the 6th phase, but areas. So the most recent was phase 5. We're going to give it some time to mature and nurture itself. Phase 1. Multnomah, Clackamas County, areas that we may have decided not to add a store because of the quality of the proposal, or it wasn't identified because they just said, oh, this is good. So we want to make sure that we have the information. Hopefully we can get some of these open sooner. So does that make sense in terms of the targeted approach? We used to do the old, and Steve remembers this, is the one, we're going to go get one. We knew it was the right place. We're going to do multiples, but in geographic areas that should support a liquor store. And then, if we identify an area, you may see no proposals or you could see 4 proposals, and then it'll be up to you to decide on
But the
those.
biggest, the statistics are important, obviously, but to me, only personally, I'm gonna be looking at what your new proposals are and how they affect the latest new stores that were opened up, if any.
Mhm.
That to me would be important, because if we already given new stores out, I don't wanna jeopardize them.
Chair Rosenbaum, that's actually part of the logic for beginning part of Metro is where 3 years should have had some time to develop and build. So absolutely, that is something that we don't want to lay something on the top of something that's new, already beginning to grow. But for example, Washington County, we came back a second time. The marketplace needs some time to grow. Maybe not all of Washington County, but the Hillsborough, Beaverton area has been pretty well covered, and most of those are doing exceedingly well. Questions, comments period. I wish Scott was here, but we'll get through this.
Chair, I'd like to congratulate you, Brian, because we spoke earlier in regards to 6 years ago where we were in a fight to maintain being a control state. And what you've done and what the commission has done and what staff has done is solidified the fact that, we're right. We're right to continue to do what we do, and we're providing them not only a lot of jobs, a lot of business opportunities for our citizens of Oregon. So thank you so much, and thank you for everybody what they do and keeping us just the way we are, but at the same time expanding.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I don't have a question, but I have a statement for you.
Uh-oh.
And I'll look at you straight in the eye. In October, everybody here was except Commissioner Palick, I believe, I'm not sure you were here, Commissioner Floyd. We had a discussion at the last round on Wilhelmina. You remember that?
I do.
And well,
I
okay.
remember every bit. You bet.
Okay. And I got a good memory. And Wilhelmina, we were going to look at the pictures that they gave in and what they actually did. And so at the next commission meeting, would you please bring those pictures to us so that we have a baseline to see whether or not we can trust in the future what people do?
I don't think, did they say 2 months or 3 months, Chair? That they're gonna have their remodel?
It's been how long? Oh, it's been 6 months at least.
4, I want to say, approximately 4.
Are they open?
Yes.
Okay.
So, Chair Rosenbaum, knowing that you were going to come back to me, because your memory is remarkable, I've already been to the store.
Mm-hmm.
Is it close? Yes. Is it complete? No. Meaning, there's some stuff on the walls with the decor to finish, but the tones or what the store looks like. Go ahead.
I kept the booklet.
Yep.
So I can make
As
a
do I.
comparison. So bring us the pictures and show it to us.
I will. I will bring that. I'll probably bring another one of the more recent ones that you did because some of these small rural, it's remarkable what they've done for a small market.
That
So,
helps us, right?
So you want a
Yeah.
brief little slideshow on some of the recent appointments?
Yeah, that would be very nice.
Okay.
OLCC flip or flop. I like this.
At our next agents meeting, the last video presentation to have a store, we can add that to the snippet of
Absolutely.
at our agents meeting next April, I forgot the month, but
April.
yeah, April, that was just fantastic what they did. I like to see if they're as successful as that video elevated to potentially be. So that'd be exciting.
Well, Chair, and since we're adding comments, the lady that presented at the last commission meeting, she did an excellent job, and if she's
yes.
interested in some part of this targeted expansion, I would like to see her involved or contacted, so. to see
Good.
if
Commissioner
that's-
Curran, duly noted, and she found us after, and she, after the appointment, and says, "Oh, don't worry, I'll be back," because she's very interested.
good.
I believe at the end of that meeting, she contacted an old colleague and said, "What?" and is beginning to work in a liquor store at this time.
Terrific. Good.
Duly noted.
Good.
Anything?
You're getting a feel for us, huh, Brian?
You just never know. No, actually, I mean, without your support to do this and to add stores, we, meaning the team, retail, distribution, administration, Steve's help, we wouldn't be here. We would still be under what Commissioner Harper remembers in 2014 or a short stint in 2016. And now the recognition from our industry folks that says what's happened in Oregon, what we've done. It's not always about pay generally, but a little recognition and praise for the performance that the commission's done here. I mean, it makes you want to get back up and get started again. So,
Well, I think I can say for the commission, we have a great deal of respect and support for you. So your word is important, and and when you do follow through with all this stuff, it just makes it even more important.
Scott's a big component of that because he is very intelligent and has done a great deal of work that supports what we're doing as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Brian.
Yeah.
Good. Do we don't
Oh, do we need to
anything
make a motion on the phase 6?
I don't think so. We don't need anything, do we?
With phase 6.
You've directed us often, but not always, to move ahead.
Well, you don't need a motion for that. We do?
We don't have to, but.
No.
Brian wanted.
All right.
My God. That's five. That's five.
You make the
pages,
motion.
Mr. Harper.
I move to direct staff to go forward with phase 6 of the open recruitment process as described.
Thank you so much.
Commissioner
Appreciate
Kern.
Yes.
Commissioner Floyd.
Yes.
Commissioner Harper.
Yes.
Commissioner Melinas.
Yes.
Commissioner Palcic.
Yes.
Chair Rosenbaum.
Yes.
Thank you. And Chair Rosenbaum, if you'd like, I'd be more than willing to hop in a car and go out and visit these two
We may
stores.
do that.
Yeah, love to.
Thank you. Before we adjourn, Chair, may I say a comment?
Of course.
I'd like to thank Commissioner Palcic and Commissioner Floyd for coming all the way out to Eastern Oregon this last weekend to the Pendleton Roundup, and they saw some of they saw the Letterbuck Room, the inner workings of it. They walked around with Andy Jurek, who here was presented with an award today. I saw him out in the audience, but I don't know if he's still here. And the rest of the inspectors and team, too. Thank you very much for traveling all that way and coming out and seeing a part of Eastern Oregon. And I know that the community appreciated seeing you and seeing the OLCC's presence. So thank you.
Word to the wise, don't get too close to the rear end of those animals.
That happened.
I'm just kidding.
No, it was the Letterbuck Room.
Yeah,
right?
there it was Letterbuck Room. Yes, of course. No, thank you, and it felt like family out there. It really did all the way through, and it was great to
It was a
meet
great
the
time.
investigators out there as well. So
And thank you for your
Thank you.
hospitality.
Yes.
You did a
Big
fabulous,
time.
fabulous job. Thank
I
you,
have no
Commissioner
doubt
Kern.
about that.
it's a great show.
You got anything else, Steve?
I do, actually. So a few things. One, we did do the NCSLA conference. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for kicking that off for us. It was very successful. One of the things that I had the opportunity to do is we actually had the new executive director of Discus here. He participated in a panel, had a chance to meet with him, talk with him about the progress that we've made, the support, and I got to say, I am really pleased and gratified with our relationship and where it stands today with them. I know Paul had a chance, the chairman, to catch up with him back in North Carolina, I believe. So that was very good. I want to take a moment. If you had 5 minutes, I'd like Jason Hansen to come up and just talk to you about the management changes we're making in licensing that are supported by the policy changes on 218 and marijuana that we need you to understand, and some of the hydraulics there for us to get efficiencies to improve that, because we need additional relief and support and cogency to the way we do licensing, the way we deal with the backlog. And I just want to expose you to the ideas you're going to be seeing as we go through that rulemaking. 5 minutes with Jason will help you catch those interconnections as you look at what we do, if you're willing to do that. Good. And I got to say, it's taken on a lot. Recently, the audits committee with Marvin on it, Jason accepted we're going to do an audit of the licensing division when he's taken on the new responsibility there. I think it's going to help us do a good reset to gain efficiencies. And that's not saying that we were wrong in what we did before, but making us work with our new understanding and where we stand today is really important. Jason.
Good morning. My name is Jason Hansen, the new licensing director for OLCC. Have been the medical marijuana manager since April of last year. A few of you I haven't formally met, so I appreciate the opportunity to speak on behalf of a lot of the work that's currently going on and that has been going on under Danica's supervision and her leadership for many, many months. They earlier in the year, maybe 8 months ago, and I could be wrong on the time frame, but I know that for a good 8 or 9 months under Danica's leadership, the team has been reviewing the work that they've been doing in licensing to identify areas of improvement, to enhance the performance overall. As you know, extreme backlog in our licenses, in just accepting and moving people through at the initial stage, as well as what we're finding with the many licenses that we have, the big weight of maintaining current renewals is a big lift. And so still very early on in that process. You're aware of Senate Bill 218 that put the moratorium in for producers and how that's affected things, some of the requirements that Senate Bill 218 put into place for us. So we are looking at several changes that are going to be upcoming, and you'll see some communications going out to the industry on what these things are over the next probably 6 weeks. We're doing some internal drafting right now, and we want to let our staff know first, of course, some of the things that are going on as an agency, and then we'll reach out to the community. But what you'll see is some changes in timelines in how we process applications. Senate Bill 218 requires this, that we do this for producers, that we enact some timelines to get people through. People have been in our queues for multiple years as we've adopted this stance early on to try to really focus on customer service help above and beyond what we need to get people into the business, really work with them. But we believe it's time to kind of start shoring up some of that work and really start holding some timelines for people, so we don't have a lot of lingering licenses sitting down there. That does definitely affect our ability to work with people who are ready. So we're going to be establishing some timeframes that hold people accountable, that will also give opportunity when they're not ready. They won't have to be assigned, so they can take some time to do that. So we'll still be working with them, similar to what we currently do. And then we'll establish a second timeline that addresses like a final timeline for them to be able to get through our process. If not, they'll be withdrawn. So in addition to that, we're going to be making some changes that can occur at application stage. If you're not aware, a lot of people make changes to their licenses or their applications, in just the initial stage of applying for their license, which many hours can be put in working through that process, only to then have to start over due to new changes. Don't incur additional fees that just really require us to start over. So it's an impact financially, it's an impact on our time. So we'll start that out with producers. Currently, that's what SB 218 required. But we're going to work on enhancing that into the other parts of licensing as well. We spoke about this at our RAC yesterday and got a good deal of positive feedback from current licensees that we're looking forward to this. So we think that that's going to make an extreme impact, positive impact to our licensing division. Additionally, under Danica's leadership, she and the team worked at creating teams within licensing. So before, you could be a licensed investigator receiving any type of license, whether that be producer, processor, wholesaler, lab, retail, or renewal. And so there's differences that come along with those things. So what they identified would be value in breaking that entire group into 3 different teams. So what you're going to see is we have investigators focusing on producers and wholesalers, focusing on processors and retailers and labs, and then one specific to address renewals. That will help you become more familiar with that work that you're doing. You'll specialize in that, and we hope that will help move things more efficiently. And we've held off on assigning new applications for some time. I know some of you have probably received some emails. I've received some emails from some of you about some delays that people are seeing and not being assigned in timeframes that they thought they would have 6 months, a year ago. Part of that work is due to us limiting the caseload totals on these investigators. As you can imagine, a large caseload makes it difficult to maintain 60, 70 at times, different applications. Trying to juggle that is very difficult. So a part of this work is also limiting the number of cases that can be on an investigator's workload so they can give better attention to them when they're there to be worked through. So that's quite a few of the changes that are ongoing. We will continue to do this work, continue to review, analyze the changes that are occurring, see if there's value in them, and continue that work. And where there's not, happy to try new things. In addition to the audit that was mentioned, we've got an internal audit that just kicked off this week, and that'll go probably the month of October with a goal of by the end of the year we'll have a report. And the focus on that is our licensing process for producers specifically, as well as the effects of Senate Bill 218. Happy to answer any questions if you have any.
I still like to, I know at the higher level of yourself and Executive Marks, you're working on purchasing of existing businesses where prior owners that had these licensed producers, licensed farms, were going out of business. So is there any way we can create some type of rulemaking in regards to that process to make it more streamlined and quicker in the future, so that currently there is a cooperation between the person that potentially could not own the business, but a new buyer coming in and wanting to purchase that? Is there any way you can look at rulemaking to streamline that?
So I can say that currently we are, and we did discuss this at the RAC yesterday, an opportunity for current licensees with the same license type to be able to come in quickly with conditional approval, begin operating the license that they want to purchase and take over that operation. Within rules currently, we believe that we can make these changes without statutory change. Am I correct, Kelly? The opportunity to take over current licensees as the same license type that you have. That's a part of our rule changes that we addressed yesterday. So it will affect this. It will streamline that process. Instead of having them be approved first, that we won't necessarily go through that application process to approve them. They will be able to step right in and take ownership and management over that license type. Current statute allows that, we believe.
Would that create a medallion type of process?
I think, Steve?
Yeah.
Really what it'll do is, that can already occur. Yes. People can go in and you're not really purchasing licenses, but you're be put in for a change of ownership for licenses. Okay. So what this will allow is it will streamline the process for you to be able to step in so that business can continue to be maintained. Okay. Quicker.
And I think really what this will do is give us an orderly way to look at these people that come in. Right now they come in, they do this, maybe they don't get it right with us. A lot of times they're trying to raise capital. There's no banking here. They need the money, not on our timeline of approval of those individuals, but now to make the business run. So I think we're looking for the opportunity for those individuals to come in, but us holding them accountable. Mm-hmm. And when we go through the process of renewal or transfer, the license and ownership on renewal.
And we'll also look at any potential compliance issues. So that will be a determination of whether or not you'll be able to step in, as if you have any potential compliance issues with this at the time. The expectation is that, of course, you're operating in under good circumstances in your current license.
So there's no doubt there's some trade-offs here, but what it does is gives us an orderly way to process those changes that are happening on the farms.
Without delay. That's our goal, is to limit the delay because of our backlog in these areas. This would help streamline that.
So that's really illustrative of why I wanted Jason to come up and talk, because some of the things that we're doing, this really has workload implications for how we're staging and changing the management of licensing to the policies that are in place and some of those rules. So we'll be pointing those out to you along the way, but it's not unimportant that we gain those efficiencies and cogency over the process and make it work in the way that we've organized to manage to it. So,
yes, I applaud the direction that you're headed, because I'm concerned that I think it will help alter the perception. Let's put it that way. That is starting to solidify out there, and at least in my end of the world. And I think that the way that you're approaching this as a team will go a long way. I think it will be a big help in the long run. You talk about, for instance, like we all heard, the cable guy's going to come sometime between 8 and 5, I mean, one of those deals, right? And everybody rolls their eyes. It's the group you love to hate. Well, I'm concerned, at least from the rumblings in the jungle where I am, that it's the go-to cudgel. Well, they're backlogged anyway, and this, that, the other. So I'm happy that you're getting in front of this and taking the approach you are. So it's great news to hear.
Thank you. And there's no doubt that resources are slim, and that's what we're really going to be getting to. But with what we do have, the goal is to always be as efficient, focus on customer service in everything we do. So at least you're aware. We can't always give you the answer you want, but we want to be able to give you answers. I mean, that's number one. So that always takes precedence. But absolutely making the best, doing the best with what we have, but making it very clear what we need to do even better.
Well, that's exactly the point. I listened very closely. I'm impressed with you, and you're doing a great job. But you're not any place near the solution to this. You're going to eventually be, the solution to this thing is to develop a system that can automatically take the applications, process the damn things, understand with artificial intelligence, understanding what the changes need to be, even issuing a license as a result of the IT that processes it, and then you'll be able to do your damn job.
Absolutely.
Right now, we're sitting here, and I'm listening, and there's not no bit of negative. You guys are doing honestly, I'm beyond impressed with what the hell you're doing with nothing. So you can't come and say, this is going to be better. It will be better than what it is, which is a low bar. But what we're working on, and I hope we get to it, is to develop that processing system that will eliminate 9/10 of what the backlog is, so that you really can do your job, you and your staff. And so you have at least a commission that understands that. And hopefully we'll get to that point. Whether we got a good start.
Yeah.
We got an excellent start. We're gonna have some money coming in. We just have to spend it wisely.
Absolutely. I'm sorry. But Chair, great point that you mentioned that, because just today I kind of kicked off an effort for internally to help us prepare for what you're speaking of specifically. And that is an internal work group, a diverse work group of individuals, everybody that deals with our licensing software, our systems, starting to address internally a more streamlined approach to currently work within what we have, the outages, the downtimes, all of the things that happen now, be more organized in those efforts, but also prepare us for that procurement process in a more effective system, whichever one we end up going with, so that we're prepared to take good and accurate engagement in being aware of what we need. Because early on, didn't know what we needed, right? I wasn't around then, but that's certainly what I heard. Didn't know what we needed. We know a lot more now. And so I think we'll be in a really good place to really put out there what it is we need to be successful, and to not just be successful, but to be a leader in this.
It'll change drastically over the next 6 months. If we're successful, you'll change it again and again and again, and then you'll get directions about what you actually need to do it with. So it's coming, and you're, I think we've got the right people that can handle it. But don't beat yourself up. You're not going to solve these issues.
One day at a time.
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. And welcome.
Yes, congratulations on
Thank you.
your position.
Anything else?
Well, I'll go quickly, but with some trepidation here. We did notice an intent to award for the privilege tax system. I'm still unsatisfied. The costs are not fully negotiated on that. We're looking at what we do with that system. We're retaining our consultants that will help us and help the staff work with both licensing and the licensing system and the warehouse and retail management design as we go forward. We are continuing to have conversations about home delivery and both how that's going to relate to IT, but also the permitting of people that are delivering on the door. Representative Doherty has put together a work group that will be organizing, leading off with a discussion here about how home delivery might be permitted in the state and how it might occur. So that's a pretty exciting discussion. And I just note that it is legislative days. We've been down testifying on the results of the listening tour on wine and marijuana, and in two committees, in both the House Committee on Trade and Economic Development and on the Judiciary Committee yesterday, Senate side. So,
Steve, if you agree, if you get a deal on the privilege tax, does that have to come in front of the commission for approval?
I actually had a question about that. I'm going to recheck. I believe you have delegated, but I would bring it in front of the commission anyway because it's a significant decision.
Right.
So I have no doubt it should come here.
Well, unless you get
Yeah.
it to the point that you're really satisfied with it, don't bring it to us.
Yeah. Don't worry, Mr. Chairman. If I don't have that cost number close for you, I won't bring it.
I couldn't resist that.
Thank you.
Commissioner, I know you love to do it. Go ahead.
Chair, meeting's adjourned.